This is our first thematic session of the day, and it focuses on sustainable, equitable, and diverse communities. A reminder to everyone that the bios of all speakers, as well as the abstracts of the thematic session presentations, are outlined in the full PAW 2021 program, which you should have received by email or is available on the PAW 2021 webpage. I'd like to introduce the moderator of this session, Dr. Michelle Johnson-Jennings, Canada Research Chair in Indigenous Community Engaged Research, Associate Professor in the Department of Indigenous Studies in the College of Arts and Sciences at the University of Saskatchewan, and a Choctaw Nation enrolled tribal member. As an integrated primary care psychologist, Dr. Michelle Johnson-Jennings has focused on bridging the cultural gap between Western trained providers and Indigenous patients, especially in regard to health benefits, as well as historical trauma, discrimination, and other stressors leading to chronic diseases. In partnerships with entities such as tribal health clinics, tribal organizations, and Indigenous communities, she's developed land-based healing interventions to encourage a renewed commitment to health and revitalization of wise practices surrounding food and leisure time activity. Her work further focuses on encouraging narrative transformations of trauma and reconnecting with ancestral love. Please welcome Dr. Johnson-Jennings.
Yokoke. Well, hello. Excuse me. I'd like to start with a couple of housekeeping remarks for a session. There will be 3 presenters, followed by 10 to 15 minutes of question and answer. During each presentation, the chat will be turned off, and then it'll be turned on during the question and answer period for questions and discussion. Now, I am particularly excited about this session because, as we know, sustainable, equitable, and diverse communities are crucial enablers of sustainable development, as well as in advancing the 2030 Agenda and the UN Sustainable Developmental Goals. Now, as I consider, in particular, the Sustainable Goal 16, which seeks to promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, as well as provide access to justice for all, I immediately recall the wise words of Wilma Mankiller, the Cherokee Principal Chief, who was awarded the Medal of Freedom in 1998. And she once stated, "I think the most important issue we have is to begin to trust our own thinking again and to believe in ourselves enough to think that we can articulate our own vision of the future and then work to make sure that vision becomes a reality." And so with that, I would like to introduce our first presenter. Dr. Ronald Siemens is a pediatric emergency medicine physician with long-term experience in global health. He has worked in Nepal, Ethiopia, Pakistan, New Zealand, Haiti, and Bermuda, as well as New Brunswick and Prince Edward Island here in Canada. For the last 13 years, he has focused his work in Mozambique. As Canadian co-principal investigator, he recently completed the highly successful Alert Community Prepared Hospital project in Nampula, Mozambique. The object of the 5-year project was to work closely with the community to decrease maternal and newborn mortality. The strong partnerships Dr. Siemens developed over the years in the community and with many public groups have directly led to Project Frango, which will be discussed today in the presentation, Can Money Buy Health? The Nuts and Bolts of a Family Income Generation Project. And so I'd like to say yokoke, or thank you for joining us, Dr. Siemens.
Thank you very much for such a kind introduction, Michelle. And I'll just play my screen here. It's a pleasure to be working with you, and I look forward to meeting with you further to talk about how we can integrate some of your thoughts into the Pediatric Emergency Department. But onward to today's conversation. Throughout the last 14 years of working with Mozambicans to improve maternal and child health, I've seen healthier moms and healthier babies. Yet, as I work with the community as a whole, my experience supports what I read in the literature, that really the #1 social determinant of health is family income. So can money buy health? Yes, I think it can. So I want to walk you through what we've done to help develop a family income project in northern Mozambique. And I hope you can learn from some of our challenges and some of our successes. So let's just set ourselves into the right context here. Context is vital to the world we live in. And I so often have learned more and more by just stopping and saying, what is the context? What is the context? So here we are, courtesy of National Geographic, looking at the world. And in Southeastern Africa, you can see the circle around Mozambique. And we'll go a little closer in on that. And you can see the green, long green country of Mozambique, bounded on the west by Zimbabwe and Malawi and Zambia, and on the south by South Africa, and across the channel by Madagascar. And we work here up in the north in Nampula, and you can see the black arrow there. You may have heard of some of local insurrection going on, and that's about 2 hours to 3 hours north of us in a country called Pemba. And you may have heard of some of the severe cyclones that have hit Mozambique in the last several years, and just recently, a few weeks ago. And they hit mainly around Beira, which is in the middle of the country, as you can see. So just to give you a little bit of context of where we're working. Further context, this is a typical home in the area that we live in, a family home. There's about 33 million people in Mozambique. Agriculture is the main industry there, and 90% of the farms are small family subsistence farms, where they may grow cassava and maize and have a mango tree or two. Unfortunately, 43% of the children are chronically malnourished. The fertility rate is quite high at 5.5 children per woman. So we have families who are living close to or below the poverty line, and one small problem or one small difficulty can turn their life into marked tragedy and difficulty. So we really want to, so our objective was to say, how can we improve the family income so they can become more healthy? And also at the same time, how can we improve family education? So these are, as anyone, when you start a project, you always have big ideas, like we're going to do this. And then what do? Well, you're always running into constraints. So these were our first two objectives. And then the constraints that really help focus our ideas. And the first was that we wanted to work closely with the Mozambican government's focus. Over the years, all the projects we have put in have always been with Mozambican policies, using Mozambican teachers to the Mozambican people. And so we wanted to do what the Mozambican government is doing, and they're following the WHO Sustainable Development Goals. And so we looked at those and tried to figure out how our project might fit with specific goals. Canada's agenda is to really improve gender equity around the world, and so we wanted to be in line with our Canadian identity, and also with the account for climate change in this very fast changing world that we live in. And then the big one that everybody says, what happens when we leave? How is this sustainable, or do we just go in and then it all falls apart when we leave? And as a researcher, I wanted to build a strong research component into this project so that we could prove what we were doing was making a difference, and use that to use evidence-based evidence to help government base their further policy decisions, and hopefully scale things like this up across the country. So we looked at the Sustainable Development Goals, and you've all seen them, and I've just put them here for a quick reference, and I'm going to come back to them more in depth in a bit. But after we got an idea of what we are looking to, how we fit in with the goals, we went and sat down with the community. First rule, as always, sit down with the community under the mango tree on the astera mats and have a chat. What is it that you need? What works for you? What is the context that you live in? How can our ideas and your ideas meld together into something that is going to be helpful for the community as a whole? And it's working in Mozambique, it's, you go in, and as always, You, as a Canadian, you think you're doing something, you then learn context and find out, oops, that's not the way it's done here. And we're constantly learning that, and we learn that because we go back to the community time and time again to ask them. So our first step was to meet with the community. Our next step was to find a local organization who was community-minded and working and strongly supported. And we've had a great connection with Unilurio, or Universidad de Lurio. They're a faculty of health sciences. And they have a one student, one family program where every student that comes to the university is given a family. That they stay with that family for the next 5 or 6 years of the student's training, and they go to that family every 2 weeks to pass on health information and to learn how that family is living and dealing with their health and life issues. So it's very community minded, and they're very supportive of working with us and the community. We then, in our travels, ran into Andrew Cunningham, who ran Novus Horizontes, which is a community-minded, socially accountable chicken raising business. And what he was doing was going to individual farms and doing an outgrower business where he would take chicks to the farmers, they would raise the chickens, and then he would come back when they were adults and take them to market. And in the between times, he would provide education in business and education in how to raise chickens. But this was one family at a time, and he was looking to consolidate and try to get a bigger economy of scale. And so we were looking to do something, and so we partnered with him to work together to build a chicken raising school. And we'll get into that in just a second. So we had a local university, a local businessman who's been in Mozambique who's raised his family in Mozambique and has been there working quite closely in this business for the last 15 years. So we had partners, but really the thing that makes the big difference in any community-based project is to find the person who the community rallies around, who the community will follow. And that man in Natakuri, our community, is Carlos Pueki. This 80-year-old lay Catholic leader is all over the community on his motorbike. He is always smiling, always energetic, and I hope I have at least a quarter of his energy when I'm 80 years old. He's been effective in supporting and getting the information to the community and from the community. And in the end, he donated land for this project as well. A very selfless, wonderful man. But the key is, who does the community rally behind? And in Natakuri, this is the man. And finally, we also, from the very start, want to know how are we going to spread the message to the community, to the government, and then to the world. And so we have a knowledge translation plan that we begin with from the very start, and use video and audio and other ways to share the message. So that's how we started a project. Then what did we do? We went back to the tree. We went back to talking with the community leaders. So very important to go not only with the elected leaders, but here we're speaking with the king of the area and getting the traditional leadership and helping to understand how they work and how we can work with them. And they've been very helpful. We met in the university with local NGOs and local community members to pass on the information. So all those groups together developed Project Frango. And Project Frango, we kind of named it because this was the funds were raised privately, and so we picked a term that had a bit of a ring to it. And this actually in Portuguese, the language of Mozambique, means chicken. And it doesn't mean a scrubby barnyard chicken. It means a nice, well-fed chicken that can be nutritious, etc. And so this is Project Frango. It's building 2 large chicken raising houses and training 8 families per year in chicken raising and gardening, as well as business principles. And what will happen is from these 2 large chicken raising houses, 10,000 chickens will be brought to market every 7 weeks. So that will bring a significant amount of profit. What will happen is Novus Horizontes will bring the chicks to the buildings. They'll teach the families how to raise them. They will then take them back to market when they're older. Profits will come back, and at the end of a year of learning, each family will have enough money to start their own 2,000 chicken per 7-week cycle on their own land. Another part of the profits will be given to the farm for maintenance of the farm, and another part of the profit will go to the community projects to support those, one of which is our motorcycle ambulance system, which we developed in our previous project. And to keep it sustainable, this farm will pay for the gas and a stipend for the drivers. So we are really pleased with the fact that every year 8 families more will be trained, and 8 families more will be trained, and it will be continuing to be self-sustaining. So the money that has been donated by privately gets multiplied year after year, and no further amounts need to be raised. So then we developed, I'm going to go forward one, we developed a research question. Can chicken raised new family nutrition center run by a community private partnership lead to successful, environmentally friendly, medium scale rural family chicken farms that show increased family income, interfamilial financial gender equality, and we didn't add in here, but also increased nutrition in the family? So what we have is 8 test families and 16 control families who will undergo extensive interviewer-led household questionnaires and have body measurements of nutrition done. They'll be followed over 2 years to ascertain what is the change in income, what is the change in family nutrition, and how is the money, who decides where the money goes, how is the money used in the family, does the whole family decide, is this just the man in the family decides, just the woman in the family decides, how is the gender equity in financial issues dealt with? And as I've mentioned, $181,000 has been raised privately, and the Community Global Service Fund through the International Office at the University of Saskatchewan has awarded $29,000 for the research element. And as with any project, you've raised some, so we're able to leverage some research money. And now we're working with the Department of Nursing together to put a proposal to Grand Challenges Canada about using some mHealth inside the project as well. And we just sent out that grant proposal. So it's what one project supports the opportunity to look for other options. So if we go back to those SDGs, here we are, we're raising chickens. So we're really trying to give family income to these people in a real way, and we're meeting goal number 1. We're providing a nutritious product not only to these families, but it'll be sold around the area. And what was being sold before were out-of-date frozen Brazilian chickens. And now we're providing Mozambican grown healthy chickens for food security. We're also improving health by giving families money so that they can buy food, so they can get education, so they can get transport to the physician, etc. We're achieving some gender equity through the use of finances in the family. And so after meeting all those goals, what do? We celebrate. The family, community gets together, shares food, and we celebrate this wonderful opportunity. And so we started the project, first of all, by looking for water on the land, and lo and behold, we hit water. And it was sort of like, you know, the old days where you'd hit a gusher, hit oil, and you'd be so pleased in the old days. Well, hitting water is like that. We found a aquifer that is appropriate in size to keep the farm going, and we will be using a deep pipe like you see here to get a nice, clear, safe water supply. And then the water will be pumped up into these tanks and used for the farm, and this will all be solar driven. This is a typical chicken farm. and myself being a little hot in the 40-degree weather, but as you can see, this has got a tin roof, wide open sides that can be dropped down in inclement weather, and lots of space for chickens with water and feeding. Biosecurity is very important, and you have to clean before you go in, and we're wearing PPE now when we go in, and we've got a electrified fence around the whole area. So it's really quite important to keep the biosecurity of the chickens. Just like to spend a minute now to talk about a success story here. This is a gentleman who was working with Novus Horizontes and Andrew Cunningham's team on the one farmer, one at a time type farm. And so I just want to show you what he's gone through. Here is his 2,000 per chicken per 7-week cycle barn that he's built. Here is his old house, which is now a storage house. And here is his new house. Compared to what we saw at the first slide of a typical Mozambican house, here he's got firm structure, a good strong tin roof. He's got electrification, he's got security, and this leads to the fact that he has money to feed his children. They go to school, and you can see happy, healthy, obviously not malnourished children just ready to take their place in the young, growing, vibrant society of Mozambique, where right now 50% of the people are under 20 years of age. So they're just an energetic group of people who are looking forward to life. So that is Project Frango. And if you want any further information, you can, the website's there at www.projectfrango.com. And if you want information on our recently finished project, it's Alert Community Prepared Hospital, SUC. So thank you. We'll save questions till the end of the project, but it's been a great honor to be able to speak to you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Dr. Siemens. And so next we'll be hearing about responding to challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic through gender and cultural sensitive development programs in Northern Luzon, Philippines. And we'll be hearing from Dr. Marlowe Aquino. Dr. Aquino is a full-time professor and core faculty member of the Graduate School of Mariano Marquez State University in the Philippines, and an adjunct professor of the Benguet State University, Open University. He's also the managing director of the Frames Development Program that focuses on enhancing youth education and sports development. He's an advocate, a researcher, and a sought-after expert on topics such as food, gender and cultural sensitivity, agriculture and rural sociology, health and sustainable communities, and more. In addition to his work serving communities through a number of national and international United Nations projects, Dr. Aquino has provided various educational institutions with technical mentoring that places an emphasis on social, cultural, techno-economic, and environmental dimensions in the Philippines and abroad. It's a pleasure to have you with us at the PAW 2020 today, Dr. Aquino. So welcome.
Thank you also to the University of Saskatchewan for inviting me. And this particular presentation is part of a continuous work of what is happening around the world now. And this is our way of sharing what we are doing here in this part of the world, particularly in our university and also in the Philippines. So we are looking at with the title, Responding to the Challenges of COVID-19 through Gender and Cultural Development Programs in Northern Philippines. In order for us to understand what we're working on in terms of gender and development, I would like to present to you a little background of what we're doing. So with our gender and development program, we have a focal system that looks at all the programs that is anchored on our instruction, research, extension, and business management. And as we work on the different plans and programs, we lead them to a sustainable development platform wherein we make our communities and our stakeholders to be part of the whole program, that they will be, at the end, be responsive and resilient. So with this framework and also program, we are looking at their involvement with our programs in the university. So this is basically our operational development framework, which we share it with our partners and stakeholders. So on the far left, you will note that this is where we bring along all the things that we do in instruction, research, extension, and business. And we use the word achieve, which is the 7-point agenda of our university: A for academic excellence, C for creative research, H for high impact extension work, I is for innovations, E for external partnership, V vibrant environment, and E excellent management. So with all of this, we make sure that this is properly supporting the GAD mainstreaming activities of our university. So this is anchored on the management support staff. They also implement it, as well as the students and faculty members, as well as our researchers, extensions, and development workers. So with this, they should be responsible and accountable to all the activities that they do, and they should be sensitive enough to the needs and requirements of our community. So with all the programs that we have, it should be properly planned, and we program this and implement it with the proper management coordination of our activities. And of course, we have our outputs and desired outcomes that lead all together to work with our national, regional, and also international policies, and also the plaindom that we work in, but specifically for our communities in Ilocos Norte. So with this, we do a lot of monitoring evaluation so that there will be an immediate response to what we're doing in our locality. So earlier on, I said that it is also for students. Our program caters to all stakeholders and the clientele of the university. So we highlight first the needs of our students, and then second, the personnel of the university, and then the community, including civil society interest groups, Indigenous and marginalized individuals, as well as their communities that are far reach from all the programs of other institutions. But we made it a point that we bring them closer to these programs. Then, of course, we work with partners, whether they are providing technical services or financial support, or even sponsorship, whether they are from local, regional, national, and international agencies. So with that, we follow the God working philosophy. In Tagalog, it is higit sa lahat tao para sa tapat, sapat, at tunay na serbisyo. In English, foremost, it is for individuals with true, real, equal, and true service. So this working philosophy has been used over the years in such a way that we bring all the programs and activities to our clientele and stakeholders. So we also made it a point that our research agenda that are prepared now for our from 2018 up to 2025, they are banking on research clusters. So you will note that these are some of the things that we're doing right now, like precision agriculture and climate change, but genetic resources and nutraceuticals, because that's where we want to bring along the results of our researches, because in the Philippines, our university was identified as one of the drug discovery centers, or we call it Tuklas Lunas, where out of the 33 medicinal plants in Ilocos Norte, near our university, we have 11 of these plants that are the sources of pharmaceutical and nutraceutical resources. Then, of course, we have organic agriculture that combines smart agriculture, and then product development, both for food-based and non-based. And then there are a lot of environmental technology and natural resource management, but we highlight on indigenous knowledge system, where we're very proud to say that with our partnership now with the University of Saskatchewan, they agreed to provide the technical support for this particular project, because we have an agreement with the Commission on Higher Education through the so-called Magic 7 of the Philippines. This is through the initiative of our Canadian Embassy in the Philippines, with the Philippine-Canadian Educational Consortium for International Collaborative Partnership. Then, of course, renewable bioenergy, and then the last one is gender and development. But this encompasses in all the research cluster. So our focus, if you can see, it's similar to what we have, but we highlighted in a more interdisciplinary sciences that combines technical, physical, and natural plus social sciences. So how did we go along with responding to the challenges of the COVID-19 through our MMSU's program? First, we made it a point that the strength and resources that we have in the university require to address the needs of our students, the needs of our faculty members and staff, the needs of the local government units, particularly the different municipalities and cities of the province of Ilocos Norte, and also the communities. What we are very proud and still doing right now is we provide support services, and we have two programs, Saranay and Sapuyot. These two programs are basically for our students that were stranded during the occurrence of the first wave of the COVID-19 in the Philippines. That was March, and then it went as far as June, until such time that the students who were stranded were given support by our university and also in their dormitories and also residents. And at the same time, as we are doing that for our students, we are also doing a lot of work for our faculty and staff, because there are already emerging and continuous webinar series and on specific topics on COVID-19. So we have to be adapted in all of these things. And then we also made it a point to participate in virtual trainings that would enhance the competencies of our faculty to serve our client and also the communities that we are working with. And then with that, we made it a point that there is MMSU virtual learning environment that was developed by our Information Technology Center, and this helped our students and faculty to place all the necessary learning packs and teaching packs that it helps the teaching learning process of our students and our faculty. With a continuous support from our different centers, we are proud also that we provide support services to our communities. And this is basically for the provision of alcohol, because one of our National Research Center, we call it the National Bioenergy Research and Innovation Center, they are the ones producing bioethanol, and with that they process again alcohol that were distributed to communities, that were distributed to government and non-government offices, and this help our frontliners to take part of what we have provided, even the PPE, the personal protective equipment, where our institute on garments provided some support. And this is also complemented by some seminars that let our community members and also our stakeholders to understand what is happening around us, particularly the effects and the thing that is happening about COVID-19. So we made it a point that this will be supported further with science-based initiatives, and we're happy to note that even in our MMSU village, the housing for our faculty members and staff, we are part of continuously supporting the food security and sufficiency of our constituents and the communities. And we are partnering, and we have partnered, with the Department of Agriculture and also the Department of Interior and Local Government Units. So with all of this, what is interesting also during the time of COVID up to now is our partnership with a telecommunication company that provided a learning hub for our students, and also for the local government units to establish a center wherein the students can go there and upload their assignments and also download the assignments and learning packs that is provided by the university faculty pool. And this made it easier because in the Philippines, particularly in our province, it was very difficult at the time last year, where the erratic connection was a problem, especially in far-flung areas. So with the partnership of MMSU and the local government unit plus this telecom communication company, they provided this as a vehicle to ease the problems of our students and faculty. So with that, we also continuously work with national and international partners that provided collaborative and sustainable partnership. And we're happy to note that USAS was one of the first respondents. And it so happened that during the first months of the COVID-19 pandemic, I was in Canada, and that led me to work with the University of Saskatchewan, University of Calgary, and also Dalhousie, that made now a good partnership with these three universities. But the first one to respond was University of Saskatchewan, and they provided a direction for us to work with. And I believe it is also included in what you have as your international action plan for 2025, the Indigenous knowledge system. And that's where we're happy to partner with you. So with this, we made it a point that we continuously participate and empower our students, faculty, and our stakeholders as we provide innovative and dynamic programs for our communities. At the same time, we directed our outcome that we ensure more responsive and resilient clientele towards healthier and safer environment. So with all of this is now happening. Some were completed, but still continues because of what is happening with COVID-19, because we just don't know. We're not sure if when will it end, but we continue to monitor with the support of our partners. And we made it a point that we are sensitive, whether you are in a culturally biased situation or even in a gender question communities, we remove those things because everybody's affected with this COVID. So we made an equal footing to all of our programs. That's why it is now continuously being maintained and sustained through time with the support of our institutional partners. How are we going and moving forward? Well, with the university, different colleges and universities, they provided a very good platform of support. So whether it is instruction, research, and extension, they have to anchor and prepare their plans and programs that would support global needs and also local needs. So what we do, because this is part of our internationalization program now, MMSU is opening to the world. So you will note that there are already countries that are included there. First, we have Japan, then Canada, US, and so forth and so on. But we also maintain a national partnership with our Commission on Higher Education through the Association of State Colleges and Universities in the Philippines, as well as the Association of State Universities and Colleges in Solid North, that looks at education, research, and development. Because all of these, from our side of the university, the colleges and implementing units, we become catalysts and advocates of change as we address the effects of COVID-19. So our development approach, in order for our partners to take part on what we're doing, we make our academic programs, research and extension, and international development, looking at, we take some of what you can offer, but we give also something that you can learn from us. Because in the university and also in the geographic location of the university and its campuses, we have a variety and a very good landscape where you can learn from it. And then, of course, we can share both our technical and social skills to any institutions and individuals that are needing the support of the university. As we do this, we ensure that there will be a sustainable activity for both our partners, our clientele, and the stakeholders. And this is through institutional development and human resource development, through the improvement of competencies and also the skills of our students and also our graduates. So we know that one of the wife of one of your staff is an alumna of our university. So we're happy to note that. So we're giving that also. So there is a continuous support to our alumni all over the world. And Canada is one that we are very proud of to help in our programs. So here, the next slide is the areas for internalization that our GOD program, as well as the programs that support the challenges of COVID-19. There will be exchanges and internship for students, but this is not yet physically done. But we're now doing a lot of virtual exchanges because a lot of our students are taking the learning route through virtual means, and there are also lectures from our fellow faculty and also research fellowship, and this is what University of Saskatchewan is doing now with our partnership with you, because you have agreed to support our Indigenous knowledge system and cultural management program through the Magic 7 of under the CHED leadership. And of course, once we have that, there are a lot of opportunities for research and development projects, which we are open also because of the expertise that we have, and also the things that we have in the natural landscape of our university, where it is really a gold mine for exploration once the boundaries are open for travel. But for now, it is more of the virtual exchange of knowledge. And of course, knowledge exchange for publications and instructional materials. And this will be through development based on the research activity. And of course, if there's an opportunity to develop new academic courses and degree programs, we are open to that, as well as the introduction of new curricula based on global education trends. So as a final word, it's very simple that what we're doing, and we share to our partners as we move along with our gender sensitivity, cultural sensitivity, and development advocacy for equal opportunities through a sustainable community, that we work as one to heal as one. So we continue to ensure more responsive and resilient community towards healthier and safer environment. And we're happy that all of us believe that there should be one heart, because we care for our students, we care for our faculty members, we care for our partners, especially our local executives, because they're the ones that work directly with our communities. But we provide also the necessary support that they need, particularly the frontliners. And then we work as one, because there is only one way to do as we address the things happening around us through the COVID-19 impacts. And then, of course, the one university is there's a union of institutions already. MMSU is open to different university partners, and then One Life for everyone, and then of course One Health that looks at the social dimension, the environmental dimension, and also the animal and crop dimension of health. So this is where we are excited, because we're looking at a lot of partners that are into One Health development program, and we are happy to be engaged and be part of. And then finally, we want to have one empowered community for everyone that we look into. So with this is how we work to respond to our challenges through the program of MMSU's educational program in meeting the challenges of COVID-19. Thank you very much.
Well, Yokoke, thank you, Dr. Aquino. I know it's very late in the Philippines, and it was wonderful to hear from you, as well as not only on your work, but on what the university there is doing. So with that, I will now introduce our next presenter, and she is Dr. Maureen Reed, a distinguished professor at the University of Saskatchewan in the School of Environment and Sustainability, or SENS. And this is where students learn the complexity of environmental issues and how to work collaboratively towards sustainable solutions. Dr. Reed is also our university's United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, or UNESCO, co-chair in Biocultural Diversity, Sustainability, Reconciliation, and Renewal. She and her students work primarily with rural and Indigenous communities on issues related to conservation and adaptation in a changing climate. Dr. Reed will conclude the Sustainable, Equitable, and Diverse Communities session with principles for transdisciplinary sustainability scholarship with Indigenous and rural peoples. So thank you, Dr. Reed. The floor is now yours.
Thank you very much, Michelle. And I just wanted to say I'm so inspired by the presentations that have already gone before us. It's just tremendous. So to say that I am speaking about what we call transdisciplinary sustainability scholarship. And as I move forward, I want to just express my gratitude for those who share this territory and homeland, including its lessons with me. So I'm presently on Treaty 6 territory. And I want to also extend a personal thank you to those who have really guided me through my own career with a lot of patience, respect, and a very good sense of humor. As I talk today, I am going to be talking about a process that involves a lot of different people with many collaborators and partners. And so I'm certainly not working alone. Unfortunately, they were not able to attend, and there is a longer list at the end as well. You've seen this diagram many times already during the course of the last couple of days. And I will say that the work of the chair, which is a co-chair that I share with Dr. Jim Robson, is one that addresses at least 8 of the Sustainable Development Goals. And in particular, we are interested in issues around equality and gender equality, sustainable communities, decent work, climate action, life on land. But we will be speaking about building bridges and partnerships in order to establish strong institutions. As a UNESCO chair, I think it's also really important that the motto of UNESCO is a motto that says it builds peace in the minds of men and women. And it is a peace building between us, I think, that is really, really vital. I also today, in a sense, want to take you on a bit of a personal reflection, although it is a group reflection, on a journey that is, in a sense, a set of principles that have helped us through a process of critical reflection and thinking about how can we make more transformative change towards sustainability. So where I work is not just, I don't work just with Indigenous communities, but I really work with collectives, if you will, where Indigenous and settler peoples have chosen to come to work together. And it's in that context of wanting to learn from one another and try to work together that we've established some principles for how we might work. And just before I turn to those, I will say that I use now the term of transdisciplinarity, but for some of you, the terminology of community engaged scholarship might be more familiar. So that transdisciplinarity suggests a collaborative and a reflexive research approach where people inside of academia and outside of academia come together to determine important questions, to produce knowledge, and to learn from one another. And I think it underscores some of the things that Dr. Siemens and Aquino have already spoken about in their presentations this morning. We also, I will say that much of the work that we do is international. So the work of the chair happens in Canada, but we also have partners in Mexico, in Bolivia, in Argentina, and in South Africa. And so that shapes some of the ways in which we're thinking about these issues. And we recognize that many of our research practices have colonized, marginalized, and disadvantaged Indigenous peoples and undermined their own self-determination. And so in Canada, Indigenous peoples have talked about 6 R's of research: respect, responsibility, relevance, reciprocity, relational accountability, and refusal. And indeed, we've also added a 7th one of trying to think about how research can actually work towards reconciliation rather than its opposite. And as we reflected on the principles, although they're articulated by Indigenous peoples, we believe that these attributes are important for all of our research partners. And our research partners include those who are formally called Indigenous, as well as those who may identify as being traditional, local, and rural peoples. So as I said, we're not solely working within Indigenous communities, but we're working across communities as well. So why think about principles? Because when we think about in Canada, for a long time, we've had multiple kinds of protocols that have been established. So the first diagram or first illustration being the tri-agency statement on research involving Indigenous peoples, or tri-agency policy. There have been frameworks and guidelines established by Indigenous peoples themselves for many years. The Nationhood Protocols and Principles document came out over a decade ago. And in fact, for many of the communities where we work, locally developed protocols don't exist. And some of the assumptions that may be embedded in Canadian protocols don't readily transfer elsewhere. And so we decided to work with our collaborators in the chair to develop a set of normative principles that could really undergird our work to inform more specific research protocols that we might establish with individual communities where we might work. And so it's really with that spirit that I'll be talking about the principles today. So as a group, as a team, we came up with 5 principles, and you'll see that the diagram that we've established also illustrates that mix of bringing together Indigenous and settler imagery, if you will, in the creation of those principles. So I'm going to go through each of these 5, and just to keep myself on time, I'll walk through them individually now, and also talk a little bit about what are some of the practices. So it's really easy to say these things, but what are some of the practices that we might be able to establish that help us to ensure them? So the first one being honor self-determination and nationhood. So really at the foundation of this chair is a commitment to honor the self-determination and nationhood of Indigenous and other traditional peoples with whom we might work. And we agree that these people have an inherent right to self-determination that really doesn't require the endorsement of researchers like myself. But we also, I think, I have to reflect on the idea that past research has really undermined this right, and to think about then, how do we enact that principle? Well, one of the first things is to recognize that Indigenous peoples are rights holders. They're not minority groups, they're not interest groups, and they're not stakeholders. And there are distinct rights that are linked to social, political, and economic circumstances, as well as their ancestry and their historic and contemporary stewardship of lands and resources that are vital for all of our well-being. So in terms of practicing that, what does that mean? Well, understanding or trying to learn more about the relationship of Indigenous peoples to land and territory is an important element of that. And also to recognize both Indigenous peoples as rights holders, but also responsibility holders. So one of our Indigenous mentors and partners to the chair, Anthony Johnson, has pointed out that if we shift our language towards responsibility as responsibility holders, that can serve as a bridge between Indigenous peoples and non-Indigenous peoples to work together to try to identify shared interests and governance arrangements. We also see that recognizing or honoring self-determination might mean to recognize that treaties are not things of the past, but are really elements of a very important present. And in this case, we have been learning about the Buffalo Treaty, which is an international treaty of the Great Plains that has been established and been expanding over the past number of years as well, that really commits its signatories to cooperating in the renewal and restoration of the buffalo that were decimated in the past centuries. So our second principle is really to commit to reciprocal relationships. So taking the time to build more trusting and more trusting relationships in both formal and informal ways. And so often this means spending time in communities. And frankly, that's tough right now with COVID. But researchers, so people like me, can spend the time learning about the history of the communities and peoples where we work. It may allow for ways of thinking about creating pathways for informal as well as formal relationships. So we've been invited at different times to come and celebrate Treaty Day in Beardy's and Okamasas, as well as in Mistawasas Nehiaywak. But it may mean also there may be informal ways of celebrating as well as formal ones. So in the case of the School of Environment and Sustainability, the school signed an MOU, but it really is, the title of the MOU is ASATA, which means to make a promise. And so that we have established a formal agreement with Mistawasas Nehiaywak as well. And so building both the formal and informal relationships will be important. And I think the message that Ron Siemens had earlier, right, is to really identifying some of the champions, both formal champions and perhaps informal champions who can help to facilitate that relationship building is important. Approaching research in a good way. What does this mean in practice? Well, it takes, I think, a fair bit of self-reflection and evaluation to really understand what are some of the practices that we might want to engage in together. As a researcher, I've made lots of mistakes and I'm likely going to make some more. But it's also to recognize that we might need to be flexible in how our research unfolds as processes are underway. It may mean asking again, what are the venues for conducting the research? So in Ron's case, it may have been under the mango tree. In our case, it may be in the places where people gather. It may mean that we begin our research with a communal meal rather than an open house, that kind of thing. So really trying to understand the events and the venues where people are comfortable in. And I think, again, this is a lesson that's important for non-Indigenous communities where formal meetings might only attract local elites. And so that these lessons that we're learning are important in those communities as well. It also means to be aware of both local cultural traditions, but the ebbs and flows of community life. So recognizing that, I'm paid to do the research that I do. But when I go into communities, those people are volunteering their time for me. And often they're layering that volunteer work on top of work obligations, home obligations, etc. And, we have to allow more time for communities to be able to make decisions. That's particularly important right now during a time of crisis. But also research activities may come to halt during certain times in community lives. It might be at times of celebration, crisis, or grief. And so really trying to be sensitive to the ebbs and flows of community life is important. And I think another way of approaching research in a good way is remembering one of those R principles that and that's of refusal, that communities might refuse at any time, not just at the beginning of the process, but at any time. Or they might say, we need to halt now until we can take care of other issues. And I think that's an important message for all community work. The fourth one is an idea about co-creating the research agenda. We often talk about knowledge translation, transfer, or mobilization. But if we're actually creating the research agenda together and determining what are the questions, who should get involved, how are we going to collect the information that we need, what kinds of knowledge do we want to bring to bear on these questions, right? If we do that together, then we're going to come up with results that are going to be more useful. Additionally, some communities may want to bring different forms of knowledge to bear on those research questions. So communities and researchers can work together to weave Indigenous and local knowledge as well as Western knowledge into those processes. In a sense, we might try to find ways to see together in two or maybe even more different kinds of lenses as well. Additionally, I think we have to also ensure that we're continuously guided by the communities that we serve, that we continuously ask for permission at each stage of the research. So co-creating that research agenda means checking in on a regular basis to make sure that we're continuing to be on track. So First Nations have established the principles of ownership, control, access, and permission. And these are important, have been important as well for the tri-agencies, but they are specifically set out for First Nations, and they may or they may not be applied in the same way in other communities as well. So it's really important to sit down and discuss with our research partners whether and how these principles might apply when we're working with them. This fifth one and last one is similar to the other, or this one, in a sense, if we co-create the research agenda, then we're going to generate benefits for local communities. And there's lots of ways in which we can do that. We often in academia, we think that, you know, because we know things or we can find things out, that that's immediately useful, but it's not. And there may be some ways in which we can create research practices to generate local benefits, and that might be by hiring local people and mentoring them in research itself. There may be some small financial benefits that come from that. It may be by ensuring that the questions that we're asking are the questions that they want to have answered. Those will provide benefits. There might also be ways in which we have other kinds of talents as well that we can share. For example, we, in this one case, and this was a project that was established by a colleague, Toddy Steelman, but where artists were brought, Indigenous artists were brought in to help teach youth some local Indigenous art, handcraft, that was considered to be a benefit. Sometimes it's because we might have certain, as individuals, aside from our research, we may have certain kinds of skills that we can share. One of my students is quite proficient in GIS, and that's considered to be a possible benefit for one of the communities where she'll work. Another one of my students was mad about soccer, so he coached the local junior soccer team when he was doing his research, and he took them to the provincial championships. So there's lots of ways in which we can engage with communities. But another thing, the middle slide really suggests to me as well that as academics, we get a lot of credit for what we do. We get a lot of recognition, and we might want to think of ways of giving that recognition back to our partners as well. So I know that time is running. Just to close, I think that you know, the principles that we've identified are aspirational, they're incomplete, they're likely to be things that we come back to as well. We're probably not going to meet our best intentions, and we're likely going to make mistakes. But I think as we continue down the path for ourselves in this particular role as chairs, we can learn from our partners about how to refine these principles and how to work with them. And I think by remembering that our research partners are Indigenous, traditional, local, and rural peoples are indeed partners, friends, and allies, and not just research participants, we can foster long-term positive reciprocal relationships that will transform research practice and hopefully generate benefits and lasting results in support of biodiversity, biocultural diversity, and sustainability. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Reed, for those wise words. Wonderful to hear from all three of our presenters today. And now we're into the next portion of the exciting questions and answers. You will see that the chat function will be open to everyone. And then if I can just remind the audience to please put your question in the chat and select everyone so that we can all see your questions. We encourage you to chat wherever you're joining from and give your thoughts or comments about the presentations. Now, to get us started, perhaps I can just ask all presenters and whomever is up for answering, what roles can universities play to facilitate societal understanding of equity, diversity, and inclusion?
Well, I can take a stab at that one if you don't mind, Michelle. I think that
great.
I think the university here in Canada, connecting with the university in Mozambique, has been extremely strong way to show the local communities in both areas that the basic learning unit that is looking back to the community for direction and for support. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to not be an ivory tower, but be a source of academic wisdom that is very close to the community. And I think doing that is in Mozambique, the university working there has done wonderful things, and the community has been very helpful there. So I think that's what universities can do is recognize, is move away from ivory tower and into maybe academic expertise passing into the community.
That's a good point. Dr. Reed or Aquino, do you have any response?
Yeah, I could say I think the universities, frankly, can do actually more than we have, and to have some serious conversations about what equity, diversity, inclusion mean for research, because it's not just about bodies, but it's also about practice and how we undertake our research, how we govern ourselves in our research processes to ensure that not just that people show up, but people are empowered to work with academics in a good way to answer the kinds of questions that are asked in those communities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for our case and my experience, what we do in the universities that I have worked with here and overseas, we open opportunities for our local communities to bring in their needs and also the opportunity the possibilities of engaging with them, because that is where we can bring what universities have developed, particularly if there are technologies, for example, products that need to go back to where they came from, especially if these are natural resources that were taken from communities. And this is where we give them opportunity also to be engaged in such a way that they will benefit from these technologies. And at the same time, we maintain, as I've mentioned, a very good partnership wherein they are not just research participant, as what Dr. Reed mentioned, but they should be partners in all our endeavors. And that's what we're doing with regards to our programs here in the university. And I think with our new engagement now with University of Saskatchewan, I think that is the one that we're excited about when we were talking with Dr. Megna and also Shirley, who is facilitating the engagement with your faculty members at USAS. So we're excited to do that, and that's how universities will work together.
Oh, that's great. Well, as I listen to all three of you speak, I think of the ivory towers, kind of disintegrating, right? And becoming more of this open field of opportunity and collaboration. So we have another question from the audience. Nicole Sands asks, first of all, says thank you to all the speakers, but how can university students engage with these amazing projects or start this kind of initiatives with communities?
I can speak to that quickly, that the College of Medicine has Making the Links program where 6 students go to Mozambique every year. And that's been extremely helpful. I'm always open to anybody coming and speaking to me and asking how they can be involved. And sometimes the best thing is I just say, listen, come with me and see what's there. And they come see and they understand where they might be able to fit in. And so those would be 2 answers that I'd have.
Yeah, I would agree with, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, for our side, it so happened that I'm the current chief of international programs. So we welcome students from overseas that would take part of our programs locally. And they will really have a wonderful time learning with our locals and also Indigenous people, because we have a lot of things to offer. And if you're really interested, you can contact me. I think I left my contact, and we can arrange that if you want to visit the Philippines, particularly in Ilocos Norte. We can do that.
Generous offer.
Yeah, I would just underscore, I think, what's already been said to, talk with your supervisors or others to find out, where they're involved and to see whether there's a way for you to start to get involved in those initiatives as well.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, the other question that we have is from Alfred Adubobi, who asks, how can the 6+1 R's of Indigenous peoples research ensure sustainability?
Well, since I raised those, I'll start by answering, but others are welcome to chime in. I think that they are not an assurance of sustainability per se, but it is a way of approaching the questions. There are lots of research questions around sustainability, or in our case, biocultural diversity, that are important. But if we are working with people, for example, ensuring that the questions that we are asking are relevant, we need to go to the communities and ask, what are the questions that you have? Or how do we work together in reciprocal relationships in which we as academics are also accountable for the outcomes? That's an important element then of building together the approach by which we might undertake the research. So each of those things, if we're doing research in a respectful way, we're taking responsibility, ensuring that questions are relevant. These are the kinds of things that will help us ask the right questions and address the right questions with respect to sustainability.
I think as well, if you go in and take somebody's blood pressure 4 times over a year and then include them in 50,000 people who've taken their blood pressure and you never get back to them and you never tell them what happened, they're not going to continue with you. But if you go and do exactly what Dr. Reed has said is then people will want to be involved. This is exciting work, and the community loves to see their friends and families moving forward, and it's great. They're very interested in it.
Well, just to share my thoughts, because I work a lot of Indigenous people, particularly when I was doing my dissertation and also work right now. When I was working with a woven natural dye weaving technology in one of the communities here, because it's a documentation research which requires a lot of time with them, I was not funded, but I made it a point that I had to give back what I have taken from them, because they were sharing, as what Dr. Reed again has mentioned, a voluntary time, and actually you cannot pay their time. But when I finished documenting what they have, I returned it with a very good publication, and then they were happy. And then that led to another story for that particular group, because it opened doors for them to have their building, as well as more support coming from the government and non-government agencies that highlighted their particular technology that I have documented. I started documenting. So with that, I believe you have to return the favor that you have taken there, especially if you're doing a research, and let yourself be part of them, but not too much, because that is something that they will treasure if you become a good friend to them. So it's a friendship that I maintain up to now. So the respect is there until where actually I was a godfather of 3 children when I was doing my immersion during the time that I was doing my dissertation work.
Thank you. Thank you to all 3 speakers. I mean, as you're discussing this, I really hear that partnerships are really meaningful for sustainability, as well as truly engaging the communities in what matters to them. So I appreciate all of you and the hard work that you are doing. And I want to say thank you for joining us today, as well as thank you to the audience and the questions that you provided.